KION News Channel 46 presents Your Vote, Your Future, the race for the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. Good evening to you and welcome to the race for the 2022 Monterey County Sheriff. I'll be your moderator tonight. My name is Scott Rates. I'm the news director here at KION News Channel 46. We have both candidates here ready for us. We have the Chief of Marina Police Department, Chief Tina Nieto, and Captain Joe Moses from the Monterey County Sheriff's Office. Let's go ahead and meet both candidates right now.
I'm Tina Nieto and I'm running for Monterey County Sheriff. And I'm running because I'm a trusted law police chief. I've spent the last 33 and a half years in law enforcement. The last 28 and a half years prior to coming to the Monterey area, I spent with the Los Angeles Police Department where I was a commanding officer. And the last 10 years of those I spent running parts of the city. It's divided into large parts, so it's equivalent to being like a chief of police of a large city. So I'm a very experienced police leader. The last 5 years, I've been the Marina Police Chief, and every year as the police chief, we've been able to make our community safer by really embracing community policing as a philosophy. I believe in accountability, integrity, trust. One of my goals is to work in collaboration with our Board of Supervisors so we can work better, smarter about keeping our community safe. You know, I'm also working with the Monterey County Office of Education. I'm one of the signers onto the $1 million grant that they're going to be getting to create safer schools, looking at our plans, working with the industry that we're copying some best practices out of other counties to do this. I've been endorsed by your deputies. I've been endorsed by the professional and civilian staff of the jails because they trust me to do the job. I've been endorsed by the Salinas Police Department. Basically, the law enforcement that is out there in the community believes that I'm the best choice to be your sheriff. So I'm looking to the voters to vote for me in November. I encourage them to go to tinaforsheriff.com if you'd like to learn more about me, or reach out and contact me. I will sit down and have that conversation. I've always been an accessible leader, and so I look forward to the November 8th elections, and I'm hoping that you will support me in my endeavor to be your next sheriff.
Hello, my name is Joe Moses, and I'm running to be your next Monterey County Sheriff. I've got 28 years of experience with Monterey County Sheriff's Office. I've done everything you can think of: patrol, investigations, special operations, corrections, internal affairs, and I'm currently the captain in charge of our corrections operations. So I run the county jail, our transportation unit, and our bailiffs units. I'm currently in charge of 320 employees. That's both contract staff and full-time staff. And I have a $75 million budget that I'm responsible for. I've also done everything they can think of in the county. I understand the different diverse communities that we have in Monterey County, from South County to North County, the Peninsula, Big Sur. I've worked in all those areas and I've built good relationships with all of them. As I'm running for sheriff, my main focus is on the safety and security of our communities, whether that be getting more patrol deputies in our communities, to get out of the patrol cars, not go call to call, but actually get out of the patrol cars and have a relationship with our communities that they serve and get to know the business owners and have that, build that. Also, school safety is a big one for me. We need to work on making sure that our kids are safe in schools, that they feel safe and are in a safe environment for learning. I'm going to push the school resource officer position in Carmel High School. I also am a big advocate for the school resource officer at North County High. And as sheriff, I'll be able to have influence over making sure that that is spread throughout Monterey County. And the third thing is the safety and security of our county jail. We need a sheriff that understands Monterey County Jail, understands what it's going to take to continue us in the forward momentum that we are currently heading, to make it a safe and secure environment. We can't have somebody come into the sheriff's office that does not understand that. We have to have somebody that truly understands what it's going to take to run Monterey County Sheriff's Office.
So there are the candidates, both candidates now joining us from the KION studio. Let's get started. We do have several topics to discuss tonight. Both candidates will have 2 minutes to answer each question. After they answer the questions, we'll have a little bit of time in there for some debate. We will start tonight with Chief Nieto with the most recent controversy surrounding the inappropriate text messages that were allegedly sent to a female officer. How would you have handled that situation differently, and what needs to be done moving forward? Furthermore, should the DA get involved with this?
Thank you for that question, and thank you, KION, for having us here today to talk about these important subjects. I just want to say to the women that have been involved in this, I'm sorry this has happened to you. No one should ever not feel safe in their workplace, and it really is incumbent upon the leadership to ensure that happens by putting the right people in the right places, picking the right executive team, training the rest of the command staff about what we can and can't do. I can tell you personally, I have zero tolerance for sexual harassment. Obviously, being a woman in policing, being an Army veteran in a field that's been predominantly male, men work in the field, and sexual harassment, let me tell you, can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter who you are, your sex, your diversity, it can happen to you, but zero tolerance. What I can tell you about the Sheriff's Department, though, there are already policies and procedures in place that either were not followed that led to this, or the personnel were not trained up on this. You know, as your sheriff, if this is brought to my attention, I'm immediately going to take action. I'm going to follow the policies of the county. I'm going to follow the policies of the state. This is not something new. Since the Me Too movement, you know, people to say, I didn't know, that's not a good answer. And so I'm going to ensure that the right things are done. And throughout my 33-year career as a law enforcement personnel, I've always followed our policies. I've always had a zero tolerance for this thing and done the right thing for the right reasons, not just because it's a rule, because it's the right thing to do to treat people with dignity and respect. So as far as the DA getting involved in that, that's a conversation that the sheriff, whoever the new sheriff's going to be, is going to have with the DA. We don't even know at this time, is there any criminal components to it? I can't tell you that because I'm not privy to the investigation and won't be until I'm the sheriff. But I will look at the investigation of where it's at when I become the sheriff to ensure that we do follow all the right policies and procedures.
That's 2 minutes.
To take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And Captain Moses, your response.
Well, I've already made a very strong statement that I will not tolerate, and we shall not tolerate this type of behavior within the Sheriff's Office, especially at those higher ranks. I was appalled that we saw the reaction from the Sheriff's Office, from the upper echelon of how it was dealt with, and I took a very strong stance knowing that there might be political ramifications along with my statement, but I'm willing to do the right thing. I'm always willing to do the right thing and make a strong stance against any time that I see wrongdoing. It's got to be prevalent throughout the Sheriff's Office, and it starts at the top whenever we're talking about harassment. I know that my opponent, she made a statement that she would have to look at the Civil Rights Office report prior to deciding whether or not the undersheriff would be in her executive management team. We can't have that. That is not how we're going to fight the culture of harassment within the Sheriff's Office. It has to start at the top. It has to be strong, and it has to be zero tolerance. I said a long time ago that the undersheriff was not going to be in my executive management team because he does not match what I'm looking for in a leader. And we need to make sure that we have a leader that takes a strong stance on this. I also will say that we have to look at our each agencies. I have the support of a lot of the females within my sheriff's office, within my staff that have worked with me, and they support me in my candidacy. I look at some of the allegations that were now coming to light within the Marina Police Department, where allegations of harassment and intimidation by the upper commanders within the Marina Police Department. So we really need to take a close look when we go into this election as to, we can talk the talk, but who's walking the walk? And I'm walking that walk. I'm making sure that this is not going to be tolerated. When we talk about the district attorney's office getting involved, yes, we can look at the district attorney's office getting involved if that's necessary. Again, I'm not privy to all the information that's available out there. That is something that we would have to look at after the election. But you know, I would involve all of the partners here and everybody that's affected to see what is the best course of action.
Okay, and then one other question, additional question for you on these bases, Captain Moses. With the recent current sheriff pulling his endorsement, why do you think he did that? And furthermore, does it change anything for you moving forward?
Well, I don't believe it's coincidence that he pulled his endorsement of me whenever I made the strong statement against the harassment within his administration. He has not told me why he pulled that endorsement. However, I don't think it's a coincidence. I'm going to stand up for what's right. Again, I talked about how I'm going to stand up for what's right regardless of what the ramifications might be. And in this case, it cost me a political endorsement, but so be it. I'm willing to do what's right, and I'm willing to stand up for that.
Chief, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, first of all, if we're just going to go to rumor and innuendo, I mean, the rumors out there that my opponent knew about the sexual harassment and failed to take action. One thing I can tell you about sexual harassment is zero tolerance. It doesn't matter if the chief or the undersheriff choose to do nothing, but anybody within the organization has to report sexual harassment when they're made aware of it. And so if we're going to go there, I'm just going to say that's the allegations that are out there now. As far as what my opponent also brought up about me, what I can say to people is ask the question, if the chief was aware of it, did she make her bosses aware of it? And was there an investigation? And what did that investigation show?
Any response, Captain Moses?
Yes, I was aware of, it was brought to my attention that these allegations were being made by the victim of the allegations. Worked with her for many, many years. She trusted me, came to me, told me that she had made a complaint with the Civil Rights Office, and she was coming to me for encouragement and also to make sure she was doing the right thing. I told her unequivocally, you are doing the right thing. She was taking all the proper steps, so there was no need for me to report because it had already been reported, and I was there to support her through the entire journey.
Chief, anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, that's interesting that I'm hearing this for the first time because the complaint was actually made back in 2018, and my opponent claimed that he didn't know about it until recently. So I'm not sure what the truth is there, but what I can say is there have been allegations that he was aware of sexual harassment going on within the department and failed to do anything about it.
Is that true? Were you aware of that, Captain Moses?
I was not aware of that, no. It was not brought to my attention until the allegations had been brought to the Civil Rights Office and that they were doing their investigation. That's when it was brought to my attention.
Okay, I've got to move on. We have a lot more topics to get to. Thank you both for that. Coming up, we're going to be talking about the fentanyl crisis and much more. You're going to want to stay tuned. We're going to also talk about the budget as well. We're coming right back. Welcome back to you. A Monterey County civil grand jury found that the jail has had 3 escaped attempts by murder suspects since 2019. That's raising security concerns. So my question is, what needs to be done moving forward to address these and correct the concerns? Let me start with Captain Moses.
Well, I was a brand new commander over at the jail when the first escape occurred. And the second escape occurred when I had just been promoted to captain. What we did was we took action to immediately go out and find these people. We brought them back into custody without any further incident. However, that does not address the issues that we talk about in the jail. What we did was we identified exactly what went wrong. Both of these escape attempts or escapes were different in many respects. One was off of the yard, one was out of a housing unit. The one out of the housing unit was in an area that has been in operation for a long time. There was a security breach that we were not aware of, and we were not made aware of until after this escape. We have since gone through and we've fixed that. We made sure that that happens. What I do whenever we have a problem in the jail or anywhere within the sheriff's office, I make sure we identify what is the issue, what is the underlying problem, and then we take action. We make action items to make sure we address those, and then we don't have that happen again. The second escape was very different. It was off the yard. It was a personnel issue. We dealt with that personnel issue very heavily, and we also incorporated some training. We incorporated further security measures to make sure that that could not happen again. We also have since moved into our new jail expansion, which is much more secure than our old jail. We brought in more technology, we brought in new techniques to make sure that it is secure. That is one of the big things for my campaign, is concentrating on the safety and security of the county jail and making sure that we're running a good operation over there and that we are continuing to make good progress into running a very efficient and safe environment.
Chief, your response.
So, one of the reasons that I'm running for sheriff is that I was encouraged by the Monterey County law chiefs. That's all your chiefs and your leaders of both federal and state agencies throughout our entire beautiful county. And one of the reasons that they actually asked me to run is that they felt like that we're not getting information from our sheriff's office. And I've been running on a campaign of transparency, collaboration, of communicating with our communities. And we just want to see more from our sheriff as far as letting us know what's going on. You know, it doesn't matter if we're in the old jail or if we've moved to a new jail. Our communities want to know these things when they're happening. Now, I understand. I've been a police chief for 5 years. I've been a law enforcement executive for 15 years. And I understand during investigative phases when we're looking at these things, there may be some information that we can't release at that time because of the safety of our communities. But the bottom line is that we have to be telling our communities and having these conversations after we've done the investigative part and not waiting till it gets leaked to the press and then having to explain why we weren't talking to our communities. So, you know, my promise to your viewers is that, you know, as your sheriff, that I'm going to be able to share information as I can legally with you so there's no surprises.
Captain Moses, would you agree that transparency, there needs to be more transparency with the jail?
Absolutely. I've been a big advocate for transparency for most of my career. When I was on search and rescue as just a sergeant and I was conducting search and rescue operations and I would have the media show up, I immediately would get with them, tell them, I know that you need this story. I know, let me give you a spot to get the footage, and then go back and do an interview. I never turn down an interview. And my promise to the voters is that I will never have no comment. We will always have a comment. There are times whenever I will have to explain that I can't give you specific information, but I will give you a time when I will be able to come back and give you that specific information. And that's the promise that I have. When we talk about transparency in the sheriff's office today, we need to be much more transparent than we are. However, my hands are tied in my position. I am a captain, I have a chief, an undersheriff, and a sheriff above me. So I have to work within the confines that are given to me. If it was up to me, we would have been on the news that night with those escapes. We would have been talking about those escapes and giving that information out. However, my hands were tied and I was not able to do that. I did pass on that information, I did pass on my opinion, but it was not heeded. And as your sheriff, I will continue to be transparent and open with our public.
And Chief, how would you have handled that situation differently?
Well, one thing I can tell you is moving through all levels of policing organizations, and I've held every rank that you can think of. One of the things that I've learned that good leaders do is they also manage their bosses. And so there's been times, sure, that I've worked for folks that are saying, we don't want to release this. But if I know this is better for the community and I have a good argument, I've gone to those bosses and abdicated my position to release it to the community about, you know, in community policing, the community wants these things. And guess what? My bosses usually will say, you know what? That makes sense, Tina. And we've released the information. I mean, you can go back and look over my last 33 years in law enforcement. I've never been one that shies away from the camera. I get out in front of communities. I have those difficult conversations. And sometimes I have to tell the community we're sorry, because I'm not afraid to talk to people about the things that we do right, and I'm not afraid to talk about the things that we do wrong. And that's what I can promise you as your next sheriff, that I'm going to be doing those things for you and for our very, very different communities here in this county.
Captain, anything to add on that note?
Well, that's where I think the inexperience with the sheriff's office from my opponent comes out, is that we do have that chain of command. We have an elected sheriff. That is the boss. And it is, you know, the way our system is set up, if I go against that, I am going to be reprimanded. I'll be, you know, I won't have a job anymore. And so having that experience here in Monterey County with the sheriff's office, understanding how our local politics work, how our local government works, is very key to this position, and that's what I bring. 28 years with Monterey County Sheriff's Office, done everything you can think of and worked every single part of it. And I have those relationships built to where, as sheriff, I can go and I can make those contacts.
Okay, I got to wrap it up, but I want to give you, Chief, a quick rebut there to the experience part that he mentioned.
So I wish my opponent would be active listening, because I didn't say that I went above my bosses. I said I advocated to get the information released. I understand the chain of command. I'm an Army veteran. I was a captain. Chain of commands are very important in our organizations. But one thing I can say, if it's the right thing to do, I'm going to advocate that position within the structure that I'm part of.
All right, thank you both. All right, fentanyl crisis across the country. It's been bad. We're seeing it right here at home and in our schools. Coming up, we're going to talk about that and what's being done about it. And welcome back to you. We have seen the fentanyl crisis here in Monterey and, of course, across the country. It's in our schools. So the next question is here, how do we take a proactive approach to cut off the fentanyl coming into our county, keep it away from our students? I'll start with Chief Nieto on this one.
Fentanyl's killing our kids. It's tragically harming our communities. It's a crisis, and it's been a crisis. I know coming into Marina as the Marina Police Chief, I immediately joined the coalition. It's called Prescribe Safe. Many of your county chiefs, the sheriffs are part of this thing, working with our local hospitals, our local, mental health providers, to create education, to map where these crises, where fentanyl is occurring. We've been doing task force with our federal partners, with our state partners, to really try to combat this horrible, horrible thing that's happening to our communities. Just recently in our schools, because of the death of the individual in Pacific Grove and to his family, I'm very sorry that happened to you. The news has been on fentanyl. We've been seeing, the multicolored fentanyl that's gauged towards children. As a sheriff, I can be part of this collaboration, but what I can bring as a sheriff is to make sure that when we're doing our task force, that we're going after not the drug users, but we're going after the people that are selling drugs to our children, that are killing our children. And I have experience in that. 15 years as a law executive, 33 years in this business. I've worked many times on these collaborative task force with our state, with our federal partners, looking for grant monies to help make our communities safer. So we quit seeing these tragedies over and over again. I can say, working with Cal Chiefs, working with your chiefs in this county, that we are looking at these issues, how we can do better to protect our children, to protect the people in our community. Yes, getting people that are doing these drugs, that's one thing to help those folks, but we have to stop the flow of drugs to our communities. And so I'm very proud that I've been endorsed by the California Narcotics Officers Association, who are like the experts in how we deal with the people that are pushing these drugs upon our children. And so we need to do a better job, is what I can say. And as sheriff, I'm going to ensure that happens.
Captain Moses.
Well, it is truly an epidemic. I have seen it in the jail. We've had multiple people that have had overdoses of fentanyl in the jail. We've saved a lot of lives. Because we have quick reaction, we're prepared to respond when people do have their overdoses in the jail. But what it really comes down to is both enforcement and education. When we talk about enforcement, talking about those task forces, increasing those task forces, working with our partners at the state and the federal level and our local level. It can't just be isolated to just the sheriff's office or Salinas Police Department or Monterey Police Department. We all have to work together in combating this and the enforcement of trying to do what we can to stop the flow. But it also comes to education. It comes to having, one of the things I want to do is build a more robust school resource officer program. And that does a lot of things, but when we're talking about fentanyl, what it does is it puts a person on campus, somebody that can keep a pulse on what's going on, and also talk to the kids about the dangers of fentanyl and what it can do. And the best educator is the people that are your peers. So these kids that are going to our schools, they look to their peers. So we need to educate the peers to make sure that that message is getting out there. I'm proud to be endorsed by Reb Close from CHOMP. She is a big advocate for medication-assisted treatment program and fighting fentanyl in our communities. And I'm proud to say that we have brought a medication-assisted treatment program into the jail. We just did that this year under my leadership, so that those that are trying to kick their habit of drugs have that opportunity, and not only just have the opportunity inside the jail to start on their programs, but we're transitioning them into the field when they are into the community once they get released, so that they have an opportunity to continue with their treatment. we will actually go and give them a ride to the treatment instead of just releasing them out the front door to walk through Chinatown and Salinas and then get hooked again. We will actually coordinate and make sure that they make it to their program so they have even better chance of being successful.
And just I want to throw this question out for both of you real quick. And you know, there's a district attorney up in Northern California who has been trying to prosecute these drug dealers if they have the evidence and the proof with murder if it ends up that a piece of fentanyl does in fact kill someone that they sold to them. Do you think that's something we should see here more on the local level? Should there be more stricter penalties for the drug dealers who, yes, we can prove that, you know, the fentanyl you sold killed this person?
Absolutely. I think that we are at the point where we need to do that. We need to make sure that the ramifications are severe enough that it will not make the drug dealing profitable. So looking at any tools that we can use, working with our public defender and our district attorney's office to see that those penalties are put in place and that we actually use those with the courts.
Chief.
So first of all, Dr. Close, you're wonderful. What you've done with Prescribe Safe is wonderful. She too has endorsed me even after she endorsed my opponent. And you can talk to Reb about the reasons why she's endorsed me, but one of the big reasons is because of the work that I've done with Prescribe Safe as a chief here in Marina. As far as the sheriff up north that's doing that, as your sheriff, if it meets the criteria that we can, you know, bring these charges against the individual, then I do support that. But the problem is that you got to get everybody else on board to be able to prosecute these people. I can bring any charges I can as a law enforcement leader, but if I'm not talking with our DA, if I'm not talking with the community groups that may advocate against that, or with the community groups that will advocate for it, I see myself as somebody to help try to bring these coalitions together. So if that's the direction that our county wants to move that, we move in that direction and we're successful at it. Now, we're just not saying things and not getting stuff done. And so, yeah, I support it, but it really it takes a community in order for that to get done.
Thank you. And just a quick note, it was a district attorney in Butte County there, Mike Ramsey, that was pushing for that. Just want to point that out. All right, coming up next, we're going to be talking about how to cover such a vast area, Monterey County, nearly 4,000 square miles. We're going to talk about that and more when we come back. Stay with us. Well, welcome back to you. With Monterey County being nearly 4,000 square miles, the big question is, how do you cover such a vast area, making sure that there are deputies on the street, and how will you work with the current Board of Supervisors to get the resources you need to keep people safe? We'll start with Captain Moses on this one.
Well, that's a great question. It is a vast county, and we have such diverse communities within our county. What is important and what are the priorities for, say, King City versus Pebble Beach are very, very different. And so we need to address each of those differently. But how do we do it? We get enough people out in the field. We get enough deputies in the patrol cars, not just going from call to call to call, but being able to get out of that patrol car, being able to interact with our community, build a relationship with our businesses and our kids. And that's what we need to do. How do we do that? How do we get there? That's the question. So one of the things that I will do is we're going to increase recruitment. We're going to do more targeted recruitment through social media, going out to the colleges, going out to the schools, so that we can get people filling out applications. I'll tell you today, we have about 30 positions, that's 10% of our positions that are unfilled. Fully funded, Board of Supervisors have approved, but we have not filled them. We have to fill those spots. The other thing that I will do is that I will hire people, deputies, to work in the positions that they want to work in, the career path they want to go down. So we need to separate corrections from patrol. Hire deputies that want to work corrections to work corrections. Hire deputies that want to work patrol to work patrol. That is how we're going to increase our ability to recruit. It is also how we're going to increase job satisfaction, and we're going to get people working in the career paths that they want to work in. That is going to immediately increase our patrol resources. And talking about working with the Board of Supervisors, I have a good relationship with our Board of Supervisor members. My job, when I go to that board asking for more positions, asking for more money, is being able to explain in detail why I need them and how it's going to be used. And that's what I'll do. I have no business going and asking for another position if I don't have a clear understanding of how that position is going to be used and how it's going to turn to the safety and security of our neighborhoods and our communities.
Okay, thank you. Chief, your response.
Look, I've been running police budgets for 15 years, and so I have a very, very deep understanding of how we get more officers on the streets. And just saying I'm going to put more officers on the street, I wish the answer was that simple. But it's very complex, and so there's a lot of things that have to be done. I mean, when it comes to recruiting officers, recruiting that right person, your best recruiters are actually the deputies themselves, the people that work for the agency. And if they're not talking about what a great place that is to work, it's a buyer's market. The folks are going to work somewhere else. We all know there's not enough deputies in the county unincorporated areas. I've been up and down this county talking to communities about their different needs, and everybody's saying, hey, we need more deputies. You know, we're down to about 52, 53 deputies just because of how the structure of the organization is right now. But it doesn't always have to be that way. You know, mismanagement halts progress. I'm a leader that understands how to look at organizations, how to, reallocate resources, how to bring people in. You know, Marina is one of the few places that we're not having a problem recruiting people to come to our agency. You know, it's about the culture. It's about people wanting to work there. And yeah, it's a smaller agency, but I've also run bigger things through my career. 10 years I spent with the Los Angeles Police Department. I ran big parts of the city, and I always had waiting lines of officers wanting to come work because I understood that you have to value the people. You have to take care of the people. You have to look at what they want, what their dreams or aspirations are to want to work for your agency. As far as my relationship with the Board of Supervisors, I have a good relationship with them also. I have hard conversations with the Board of Supervisors already. I'm not even your sheriff. They call me to ask, my opinion on things. Why? As a post-commissioner, I have to keep my finger on the pulse of everything that's going on in our state in the policing area. I have to know about the way legislation is moving, the way legislation has just landed on our plates, what's going to be expected of all law enforcement agencies in the state of California. So yeah, I'm going to continue these conversations I'm already having as your next sheriff.
Great. I kind of want to expand that because you both say that you have a good relationship with the Board of Supervisors, but when it comes down to brass tacks, how are you actually going to get them to give you the funding, to get the resources you actually need? Because we haven't seen that.
So I've talked about it before. I've talked about it in articles. One of it is having that really solid relationship even before you get to budgeting. And then also understanding your budgeting process. Have a solid understanding. I don't need to be the expert as the sheriff, but I certainly need to make sure that my fiscal team is doing the right thing and explaining why the budgeting is. Look, the bottom line is personnel costs you the most money in any other agency, so we need to be better fiscal managers of our budgets. In the city of Marina, yes, the budget's smaller, but over the last 5 years, I've saved the city probably over $3 million that we're able to go back into streets, into lighting, into whatever the general fund, whatever your legislative leaders decide to do with that. But you have to have that understanding. I had that understanding because I was a certified fraud examiner at one point, and I did auditing. I worked for the auditing teams for the Los Angeles Police Department, and we would look at these issues. Okay. So you have to be able to explain it and bring it down to language that they understand.
Great, and we'll talk about managing the budget in just a moment. Captain, I want to get your response real quick.
Well, I think it's looking at alternative funding sources as well. The Board of Supervisors does do a good job on balancing the budget for the entire county. And, when we do have some shortfalls, we need to be able to, as I explained, go to them, explain to them why we need it, why it's important to the county. But looking at alternative funding sources is really, I think, the key to making sure that we're meeting all the mandates that we have and expanding the programs that we currently have. I've been an expert in bringing in other funding sources. The medication-assisted treatment program I just talked about a few minutes ago, that program is funded entirely by grants from alternative funding sources. We are looking at building a behavioral health center at Monterey County Jail. That money currently is coming from grants outside the funding source, an outside funding source. So it's not affecting Monterey County budget. It's getting money from the state, it's getting money from the federal government where we need to collect that money from. Otherwise, it's going to go to another county agency or another city. Okay,
great. Thank you for that. Anything else to add there on the working with the Board of Supervisors?
Again, we talk about transparency. Sitting down and having those meetings with each individual Board of Supervisor member and explaining our operation, why we need it. Showing the reports. That's one of the things talking about transparency. Let's show the reports that we have about the jail. Let's show about the reports that we have concerning RIPA and how we're patrolling the county.
Great.
Let's show all of that.
Thank you, Chief.
So my question is, the couple programs that my opponent talked about, that funding's been out there for quite a while. Actually, it's best practices. It didn't start here in Monterey County. And the funding is both federal and state funding that supports these programs. And getting the money is really for some of these agencies is just submitting the paperwork and getting the body to be able to do the program that you're asking to do. So my only question would be, why did we wait so long? And I can tell you as your next sheriff, I'm not going to wait. Best practices, that's how you do it. Going after grants, that's how you do it. I mean, that's what leaders of law enforcement agencies do. I've gotten the last 4 grants that I've applied for in the Marina Police Department. You have to stay on the grants. You have to know what your grant writers are doing. You have to be aware of what's happening on the federal level. Okay. You need to be aware of what's happening on the state level and then the municipal level. Great. I already do that. That's a skill set that I'm going to bring as your next sheriff.
Great. Okay, we'll stop it there. And coming up next, we're going to be talking about managing a budget, many working parts inside of the sheriff's office. We'll see you in just a moment on the other side of the break. And welcome back to you. With so many working parts inside of a sheriff's office and a big budget, we're talking about a budget of over $140 million. How will you manage that, and how will you manage all of those working parts? We'll start with you, Chief.
So when you're managing large budgets, your sheriff is not the person managing the budget on a day-to-day basis. Look, I'm not even the sheriff, and yet I've been meeting with the fiscal people that to talk about budgeting issues, what are the problems, what can we do to correct it. And so that's kind of the meat and potatoes of some of the budgeting stuff. But it really is about managing people. It is about putting the right people in the right place, selecting your right management team, and holding them accountable. And that's where large organizations fail when it comes to budgetary control. I can guarantee you as your sheriff that I'm going to be holding the people that work for me accountable to do their jobs. But I'm not just going to hold them accountable. I'm going to make sure that they have the tools, the training to be able to do their jobs. That's the complaint. When you talk about people that are managing big pieces or big organizations, they say, well, I'm not trained, or, I'm not giving them the tools. Well, that's one thing that I'm going to do as the next sheriff. Look, my expertise is developing people. I look to develop teams I want to surround myself with people that are smarter than me. I want to develop the teams that are going to go on and do great things. And that's one of the ways that you manage the budget. The other piece we already talked about, how, developing our relationships, talking to the Board of Supervisors, making sure that we're doing, the boring stuff is doing the projections, doing the 1, the 2, the 3-year progression or projections of where the budget's going to go. And it's going to be a daunting task. You need a leader that is a proven leader that's been doing this over the years, because the budget deficits, it was $2 million on the sheriffs, but they had to end up asking for an extra $20 million. And as we move forward, the entire county budget, we're looking at $24 million, then $35 million, and then $38 million, looking at 5-year projections. And so you have to have somebody that understands how to develop the best teams to be able to deal with these type of crisis or complex things that are going to occur in our sheriff's department as we move forward.
That's time's up. Time's up there. Thank you. Captain, your response.
Well, as captain of the jail currently, I run a small city. I have a budget of $79 million, and I have 320 employees, and that's both full-time staff and contract staff. So it comes down to experience, understanding how to run a sheriff's office budget, because it's very different than a police budget. It's very different than a city budget. I understand the complexities. I have to maintain medical care. I have to maintain dental care. I have to make sure that food service is available. I run commissary. All of these things, not to mention the safety and security of our jail. And also, it's important to understand that the sheriff's office budget, 85% of it is salary and benefits. No control over that within the sheriff's office. That's what we have to pay. It's contracted through the county to pay our employees a decent wage so that they stay here, that they work here, and that they don't try to find greener pastures someplace else. So when we talk about the budget, there's those mandates that we have to cover, and then we have about 15% that we have for those other projects, those special projects that we need that we want to accomplish, and also just keeping the lights on. That comes out of that 15%. So having that understanding, already managing the budget for the last 3 years of the jail, $79 million, understanding all those pieces that need to go into it, and I do balance my budget every year, and making sure that we continue to balance our budget, and when unexpected costs come up, as they sometimes do, we do have to go to the Board of Supervisors. Again, going back to explaining in very specific detail on why we need the money and what it's going to go for is the key to managing this budget.
Chief, would you like to retort to any of that?
Yes, I find it very interesting that my opponent thinks that a sheriff's budget is that you need to understand things that the rest of us can understand. Look, a budget is a budget, because if it wasn't, the people that actually run the budget wouldn't work in other county departments. And the people that work in our sheriff's budgeting office came from other counties where they ran budgets. Yes, parts may be different, but running budgets that meet budgets, that's the same skill set, a skill set I already have. And when it comes to running large cities, as my opponent stated, I ran 4 different ones in the city of Los Angeles because they divided up into geographic areas. So I ran bigger pieces of the city with more personnel with budgets back when I was in the city with the city of Los Angeles. What I can tell you is that I'm going to develop the best teams. I'm going to get them the training that when we do deal with our budget, which we have to every year, that it's a well-sound plan on where the monies are going to go. And as far as like 80% is personnel, my opponent's right, it is. Most budgets are. But here's what I'm going to do as your sheriff. When we get people, because we're going to become the best sheriff's department or office in the state, people are going to stay. So I'm not going to have to keep rehiring people and spending money, which are personnel costs from our budget, to retrain people. These are all things that leaders know how to do to manage those personnel costs.
Okay, real quick, I got to move on, but I want to give the captain a chance to respond to that, specifically the part, not understanding part of the budget or throwing part of the budget out there that people can't understand. Go ahead, Captain.
Well, my opponent has run a city police department budget. Got it. The jail budget is very different. I don't think she's ever provided for medical care. I don't think she's ever provided for food service. I don't think she's ever provided for clothing for our inmates or the transportation costs that go along with it. So a police department budget is very different than the sheriff's office budget.
Okay, I've got to move on. Thank you for that. And welcome back. Good evening to you. Homelessness continues to be an issue all over the state and, of course, all over the country. We're seeing it here at home as well. So the next question, and we'll start with Captain Moses on this one, how will you handle the homeless crisis here in Monterey County?
Well, that's a great question. That is one of the big things that I have been talking about throughout my campaign is homelessness. I think that homelessness is grounded in mental health is a big issue, and we haven't been addressing those underlying issues. And I've had a lot of people throughout the campaign ask me, why is the sheriff so involved in homelessness? And I'll tell you, it is a big drain on our resources. It's a big drain on our economy. We have to make sure that we address homelessness, and we need to address the underlying issue. That's why I'm building a behavioral health center in Monterey County to address that mental health part of it, and so that they can get the resources that they need, the medication, the counseling they need, so they can be successful when they get out. We just don't have enough beds in Monterey County for mental health. The other thing that I'll say is that my opponent will probably be talking about how she has come up with a national model for homelessness in Los Angeles. Well, that national model does not seem to be working in LA. Last time I drove through there, it does not seem to be subsiding. I do know for a fact on how she addressed homelessness when she came to Marina Police Department 5 years ago. She pushed all of the homeless people out onto the county area, out onto Lapis Road. I was the commander in charge of special operations at that time. I went out there, I talked to each individual person that was the homeless person that was living in their trailer or in their RV, and I brought the resources that they needed. I brought the Veterans Affairs, I brought County Behavioral Health, I brought substance abuse counselors, I brought homeless advocates to help find these people homes, to get them out off the streets. And at the same time while I was doing that, I worked with Supervisor Jane Parker's office to have a safe parking area established, so that those that still needed more help, were not ready to get on their feet, had a place to go where they could go and get those resources and become better and get out of the situations that they were in. So how it works in LA does not necessarily work in Monterey County. We need to make sure it stays in Monterey County. Thank you.
Chief, your retort.
Hi, thank you. Obviously, Joe doesn't know his time dates, nor does he probably know when I started in the city of Marina, because Lapis Road was already there when I took over as the police chief, and it was a big problem. And it was a problem that the county was already dealing with. And, you know, your viewers can actually bring up the articles, figure out when I started as chief, and figure out when the supervisors were working on Lapis Road. So that already existed, and Lapis Road is in the unincorporated areas. So I'm not quite sure what caused that, but that was there when I came in. But what I do know is that we then had to work with county to look at that issue that Lapis Road was causing. But one thing I can tell you about, but besides that and all the wrong dates that my opponent had, besides that, your sheriff should not be in the business of homelessness. But we are, because we're the last people that you call when you're dialing 911 or you see an issue. What we should be doing is collaborating with all these people to try to find housing for our unhoused. And it's beyond just mental health. And if the sheriff thinks all people that are homeless are criminals ending up in the jail, well, I'm a little offended by that. Because that's not the case when you deal with homelessness. Homelessness exists with our children. It exists with our families, with women that are out of work, people that have lost their homes. That's why this isn't a sheriff's problem. This is a community problem that we will have to work collectively and collaboratively together. And yes, I know the model that was created where I came from doesn't work everywhere, and that's silly for anybody to think that you can just put something from here to there. You have to work collaboratively with your communities in order to come up with solutions that will work for wherever you're at. And I'm the one person who has the most experience of working, collaborating across the board with very different communities. Communities of color, diverse communities, the social economic differences in communities. I have that experience. I understand that. I know the big piece the sheriff brings is the power of the sheriff's office to help push our communities to create safe housing for everybody.
Okay, you got to wrap there. Would you like to respond, Captain?
Yes, it was 2017, just for the clarification. And we do need to we do need to build these collaborations, and that's what I do. That's what I've done my entire career. Going back to my search and rescue days, I built a response plan that included Big Sur Fire, North County Fire, the fire departments, the paramedics, so that we had a coordinated response. We need to do the same thing with our homeless issue. We need to bring everybody to the table. We need to work with our mayors. We need to work with our city councils, our county council, to be able to make that collaborated response to homelessness and address the underlying issue, not just put a Band-Aid on it.
Great, really quick, we got to wrap here, but anything else you would like to add to that, Chief?
Yeah, I became the chief at the end of 2017, so I'm not sure how many people moved there in that 3 months, and so I didn't really start working on the problem until about 2018.
Okay, thank you for that. That's all for that. We're coming right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We're wrapping up. Thank you to both candidates. It's been a great night. Very insightful. I think we learned a lot about both of you. We appreciate it. I do have one final question. The current sheriff right now has a little tradition. Sheriff Bernal has a tradition of wearing a cowboy hat sometimes on camera. We had him on the other day. He was wearing his cowboy hat in a picture there. Will you continue a tradition like that, or do you have something else in mind for a little tradition? We'll start with you, Chief.
So one of the things I've always done in any organization that I've joined to become part of the team is looking at why the tradition exists. And if it's a good tradition, we keep it. But if it's a tradition that the community may disagree with it, then maybe that's the tradition that needs to go away.
Would you bring another tradition?
Well, here's the thing. I have to talk to more communities about it, but right now I've worn a cowboy hat, so I'm not afraid to wear it because I think it is, at this point, a status of our sheriff's office. But there has to be more work done to talk to some of the communities. That I have talked to some, and so I don't know if it's the majority or the minority, who feel like the cowboy hat represents something else. I just think we need more information before we throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Fair enough. Captain.
I love the cowboy hat. I like the tradition behind it. When I first got hired back in 1994, I did not want to wear the cowboy hat, but I got used to it. And our county is so rural, and we have so many rural areas. We have the Salinas Rodeo every year. Yep. I mean, I think it's steeped in a lot of tradition. I think it's a good look, and I have no problem with keeping the cowboy hat as our uniform.
All right, that's it. I'm done. Thank you both. We really appreciate it. That is our debate for tonight. Thank you for joining us. Have a great night, folks. Good night.